Hi, here's a quick demo of my DashSelector, which could be an alternative to Rocky 5's DashLoader. DashLoader, as you probably know, is an excellent piece of software that lets you select a dashboard your Xbox will boot to and will also apply ISO kernel patch so that you can use or mount ISO files. Now, I've been using DashLoader for some time, but I wasn't too happy with two missing features. One was lack of support for my favorite M8 Plus BIOS, because DashLoader only supports IND 5003, I believe. And by support, I mean it won't apply ISO patch for anything else than IND. The second thing is that it takes some time to boot, and the reason for that is when the Xbox boots, it loads DashLoader first, then DashLoader reboots to ISO patcher, which in turn reboots back to DashLoader, and finally to your selected dashboard. That longish sequence only takes place on first boot, because ISO patch survives IGR, but still it can be annoying. Anyway, I thought I'd make my own improved version, and here it is. It supports several kernels or BIOSes, including IND, X2, and M8 Plus, and has slightly shorter boot sequence. In my case, the Xbox loads DashSelector, which boots to ISO patcher, and ISO patcher boots directly to your selected dashboard. I modified and recompiled ISO patcher assembly code so that it can take startup parameters, and that selected dashboard is the parameter. It obviously only happens after hard reboot. Patcher is not applied after IGR, so the boot time is even shorter, but that also applies to Rocky 5's DashLoader. The patcher is safe for any BIOS, as it won't apply any patches if your BIOS is not supported. Another feature I added is what I call Emergency Dash, which is simply a tiny HTTP server that lets you upload any XBE file that the Xbox will boot to if any other boot method or dashboard fails. Also, since it's almost Christmas, DashSelector lets you define LED color for each dashboard. So after that longish sequence, here's the demo. So my Xbox, as you can see, is fresh right after hard mode state, so it boots to Unleash X. But I also have XBMC for gamers and XBMC emulation. Again, huge thanks to Rocky 5. I think I also have Evox dashboard and obviously the stock Microsoft dashboard installed. Installation of DashSelector is pretty much the same as DashLoader. It simply replaces your default Dash, which in case of M8 Plus BIOS is evox-xb on C drive. It also needs ini config file, but let's upload the DashLoader and see what happens. So I'll switch to my desktop right now, connect to my Xbox, and on C drive, as you can see, there's evox dash, which is that default dashboard. So I'll rename it to something else. I'll upload my DashSelector and rename it to whatever the default dashboard was. So evox-xbe. Okay, with that done, let's switch back to the Xbox and reboot it, and let's see what happens. And obviously it failed, and this is that emergency screen that I told you about. It failed because we didn't provide any ini file, and the DashLoader has no idea what to boot essentially. But again, this is the perfect opportunity to show you that white screen of death. So let's just see how it works. So we just go and follow the instructions. So we'll go connect to that IP address. I'll switch back to my desktop again, and there we go. So this is the address that was displayed. Let's pick something. This can be any XBE file. Xbox will just boot to that. So in this case, I'll pick Unleash X, so that my Xbox will boot that file. So upload and boot. And let's switch back to the Xbox. So as you can see, just reboot it to unleash X. So whatever that file was, it rebooted to that. Now, since I have unleash X loaded, I can now use FTP to fix the problem. So let's switch back to my desktop. We won't need that anymore. So here's an example of INI file. So obviously this is a comment. So the structure is very simple. Like just you define a button, you define dashboard that the Xbox will boot to when you press and hold that button. LED color, you can see some sample colors here. And then the patcher, if it's 0, it means that the ISO patch won't be applied. You may or may not need this. In some cases, it may be beneficial. It makes the boot time like a few milliseconds shorter, but again, your choice. By default, patcher is applied. So, for example, in this case, when the Xbox will boot evox-xb, the patcher will not be applied. In this case, for example, where it'll boot XBMC EMU station, the patcher will be applied because it's not 0. There's two interesting, I think, examples which I can show you. So by default, when no button is pressed, it will boot XBMC for Gamers. And also I have XBMC for Gamers when booted when I press and hold start, but in this case, patcher won't be applied. So let's see how it works. Let's upload that INI file. You can place your INI file or on either drive C or E. I'll put it here on C. Okay, now that's done. I'll switch back to Xbox. And let's reboot it. So right now it should start XBMC for Gamers with ISO patch applied because I'm not holding any buttons. So XBMC for Gamers booted, and just to prove that ISO patcher works, I'll show you that this is actually ISO file. I think it's on E. So there it is. So this is ISO file. So let's try and run it. And since we applied, the ISO patcher has been applied, the game should start, and it does, as you can see. So that's how it works essentially. Now I'll reboot again, and I'll press and hold start so that it will boot to XBMC for Gamers again. But in this case, ISO patch won't be applied. So let's see what happens. So I'm holding start button. And we should see XBMC for Gamers starting again. But let's try and run that game again. So as you can see, it rebooted back to XBMC for Gamers because ISO patch has not been applied, so there was no way that game could run. So that's how it works. I'll show you another example. So X, I defined X for booting stock Xbox dashboard. So I'll reboot the Xbox and I'll press and hold X again. Sorry, not again, I'll press and hold X, and the Xbox should boot to just stock Microsoft dashboard. There we go. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Two more things. One, you can use you can use DashSelector as a drop-in replacement for DashLoader, because it supports DashLoader CFG files as well. So if there's no INI file, the DashSelector will use whatever you defined in CFG DashLoader CFG files. So that's one thing. But obviously, I'd recommend INI file because I think it's more flexible and it's just one file. Another thing is that you can, anytime you can boot to that white screen of death or emergency dashboard when you press and hold D-pad. So I'll reboot my Xbox again and press and hold D-pad, and it should boot to that emergency dashboard or white screen of death. The reason for that is that you may run into issues where the Xbox will go into some boot loop where maybe some issue with the dashboard or with the missing files on the drive or whatever. So at any time you can boot to that white screen of death and then upload via HTTP the XBE file that the Xbox will use, and you can then use FTP to fix whatever problems you had. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Again, there's nothing wrong with DashLoader. It's perfect, great piece of software. But again, for my particular use, I think DashSelector is slightly better, so that's why I'm using it. So yeah, that's it. Thanks, guys.